Hey guys, welcome back to Concordia Jedi for another Q&A. I know I said this one was going to come out back in March. Things got away from me, but I'm here to answer the questions that were on the Q&A poll now. So, why don't we get into it? First question from Nightwolf18. What made you start writing Cassius? I started writing Cassius because I had this idea since I was about 15. This character that started out very vague, just a Jedi that survived Order 66, and at the time was a very generic story, but over the years I would kind of just absent-mindedly, or if I had a little bit of time with a notepad on my phone or whatever, just make little notes, just kind of do things where I could add to the character or his story, just adding bits and pieces. And then by the time COVID hit and the pandemic, I had more time, and I started, fleshing out the character and the story a little bit more. I outlined the entirety of the story, and when I looked at everything together, I said, this is something. At the very least, I should start writing this and record it just so I have it recorded, say, hey, I did my own story set in Star Wars. And that's basically what made me start writing, was just the desire to tell my story, have it recorded. And I've said this before, I never thought people would catch on to it. I never thought it would catch on with anyone. So the fact that there are people listening to each chapter, people that are theorizing about what's going to happen next, it really does warm my heart. Like the videos, the Cassius chapters, none of them are like reaching like massive views, but that was not my intention going in. My intention was just to tell the story. And so the fact that people have come to the story and are enjoying it is it's heartwarming. So thank you guys. From Nixter745 the Bold. And Nictor745 the Bold asks, is Cassius, misspelling, but I'm sure one of those comments was correcting. Yep. Is Cassius set in the EU or canon? So I tie Cassius into the canon timeline. With that said, I do take elements of the expanded universe and work them in where I can or where it seems fitting for me. Because I am of the opinion that there are large portions of Legends or the expanded universe that could easily be fit back into the current canon that don't conflict. Like honestly, you could fit almost the entirety of the Old Republic series back into canon and you wouldn't mess up much, but that's neither here nor there. Cassius is mainly set in the canon universe, but again, it is my own story. This is not canon to Star Wars at all. I wish it was, because I've had so much fun writing it. Thank you for your question. Ethan Schultz asks, how were you introduced to Star Wars? So I was asked this actually on another Q&A. It was my parents, and I bet there's times they regret that. But it was my parents. They grew up, saw the original 3 in theaters. They thought, oh, these are fun movies. We'll show our kids these. This won't turn into an unhealthy obsession with one of them. They showed me the original 3 movies, A New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi, when I was little. I don't remember too much of it, but I remember the first time seeing it on a big screen. It was the student commons where my dad worked. He was working as the dean of students at a seminary, and the student activity board was putting on a movie night for family and faculty and friends, and so they were showing the first Star Wars, and it's a big auditorium, a big screen. They had a projector. To my recollection, it was probably, if it wasn't an original, because this was an old copy of the film. I remember even back then, seeing it on this big projector, I was thinking this thing looks very, very dated and old. So if it wasn't an unaltered copy of the first Star Wars, which I doubt it was looking back. It was probably the special edition, but either way, I remember sitting down watching Star Wars for the first time, really taking everything in. This wasn't the first time I watched it, but this is the first time I sat down. I was able to really take everything in, and I loved it so much. So that's really how I got introduced to Star Wars. From Noah Stewart, if you were a Jedi in Star Wars, who would your master be and why? That's a tough question. I'd like to say probably either Master Yoda or maybe Plo Koon. And I guess maybe Qui-Gon Jinn too. All three of them I just find to be extremely wise and compassionate people. And that's what I think a Jedi should be. You know, you have to have equal parts wisdom and strength and compassion. I wouldn't have someone like Ki-Adi-Mundi, who seems very detached and, quite frankly, emotionless in nearly all aspects of Jedi life. Same with Mace Windu. Like, people say they would like to have Mace Windu, but again, it's one of those things, like, I feel he lacks a lot of the compassion that makes a great Jedi. So I'd say probably, Yoda, Plo Koon, or Qui-Gon. From Deb the Second, what is your least favorite EU era? So I read a lot of the EU, but there were hundreds and hundreds of books spanning years and years. I'd say probably my least favorite era, you know, I don't even really tie it to era. I tie it more to like just stories from the EU that I didn't care for, or plot lines. And the one that I did not care for that a lot of people did was the Yuuzhan Vong. I did not care for that, mainly because I felt the whole idea of there's a race that is immune to the Force limits the Force. And I get the idea is that, well, that's part of it, though. It is unnatural, like that's what makes them so scary and dangerous. But I'm like, no, let's not do that. Don't limit the Force. The Force is supposed to be this energy field that binds everything in the galaxy together. It is the living force inside everything. It binds everything together. It is everything. And so just seeing a villain where it's like, oh, they're immune to the Force, even if they're outside of the galaxy, again, that limits the Force if it's supposed to be everywhere. Or is the Force just restricted to one specific galaxy? That's, I think, kind of narrow-minded. Maybe that's not the right word, but I just didn't get into it. Mainly for that reason. Just, I didn't care for the Vong as villains. I thought their design wasn't that interesting, at least to me. Everyone else seems to love the design. I thought they looked more like orcs from Lord of the Rings, but yeah, I just didn't care much for the Vong series, the Vong saga. Had some cool stuff in it, but I overall, I was not a fan of that. From Zachary Waxter, here are my questions. How are you, Concordia? Has life been treating you well? Life has been treating me well. Yes, I had a wonderful time over this little Easter break here. I got to meet my nephew for the first time, about 7 weeks old now, and just the sweetest little baby ever. So, finally got to hold him, say hello. That was really nice. So yeah, life's been treating me well. How did you come up with Concordia Jedi as the channel's name? So, Thomas, a friend of mine who is one of the other founding members of Concordia Jedi, you've seen him on the channel from time to time. He and I met at Concordia, Wisconsin, where we went to college. And I've told the story how we met during movie night. They were doing a showing of The Force Awakens, holding a costume contest. But we became close friends after that night. You know, we bonded while watching the movie. We became really close friends. And, you know, during the lead up to The Last Jedi, we had gotten some Ultra Sabers, you know, what we at the time considered high quality sabers. And, you know, we decided to like film some duels, put them up on YouTube. And we're just going to put these up so we can, again, have them recorded and just put them up there, look back on them years later. And we were trying to come up with a name, like, it has to involve something with Jedi, and Thomas suggested something with, you know, Concordia, and so we came up with Concordia Jedi. And it was only later we realized, oh yeah, Concordia is also one of the moons of Mandalore in Star Wars, so this works on multiple levels. So that's how we came up with the name. From 212th Trooper, this is a question of a bit more a serious matter, at least in comparison to my other questions. You recently made a post saying you were done with any Star Wars sequel trilogy content, more or less. I understand your feelings on the matter, and while I'm not a fan of the sequels, I was actually disappointed to hear you were dropping any content in that area, or in that era, because I was actually excited to see what you could do with it, despite my feelings. In short, is this set in stone, or is there a chance you'll change your mind? Apologies, for some reason this has weighed on my mind the last couple. So, with the news that just came out that we're getting some more, we're getting another movie set in the sequel era, or 15 years after Rise of Skywalker, starring Daisy Ridley. Hopefully we're getting it. Movie plans in Hollywood these days change on a dime. I can't say for a fact that I'm done forever, but still, for the time being, if I talk about anything sequel related, I'm gonna keep it light, because just anytime I bring up the sequels, and again, I enjoy the sequels, I recognize their flaws, but I enjoy them, and it's just, I can't talk about them because it's just, the comment section just becomes a cesspit of people just arguing, and then I get pulled into arguing, and then I don't like arguing with my subscribers. I'm not gonna be a pushover. I'm gonna stand up for what I believe. I enjoy the sequels, but at the same time, I've just gotten so sick of just the constant vitriol that comes anytime I even mention something like The Last Jedi. And it weighs on me in the sense that it becomes emotionally draining, because this isn't the first time I've gone through with this. I was going through this when I was, a teenager too, because I was still riding the Star Wars high when I was like 13 or 14. And I loved the prequels. But it was, at that time, everyone hated the prequel trilogy. So I was getting crap on YouTube and everything there too. It was, there was just no way to win. And nowadays, it's like, oh, the prequels are beloved. It's like, okay, so I can enjoy those. Can I enjoy the sequels? No. I was like, okay. So, and so it's just been a whole thing of, I'm tired of just the constant backlash anytime I even mention that I enjoy the films. I can't even bring up like, hey, I like The Last Jedi. Here's something I enjoyed about without people coming into the comments just yelling about how so-and-so ruined yada, 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 should have done yada, yada. I'm like, what gave you the impression that this was the post? I literally just said I liked this about the movie, and you came in with your baggage. It just becomes emotionally draining after a while. And again, have your opinions. I don't care if you love the sequels or if you despise them. I don't care one way or the other. But for the love of God, if someone's mentioning the films in whatever aspect, be respectful. If you're talking about why you don't like the sequels, first of all, run it through a spell check. Half the time I see sequel bashing content on YouTube or Twitter or whatever. These people have never heard of Shirley Method, frankly. Just for the love of God, be civil. That's my biggest thing. Just be civil. We're all Star Wars fans. We all love Star Wars. Maybe we love different aspects of it, but we all love Star Wars. Let's try to remember that. So, yeah, again, long answer to a serious question, but I hope I answered it. From Luke Willis, do you have any plans for a project after you conclude Cassius? I hope so. I've really been enjoying your videos. You're always telling a compelling story or making us laugh. Cheers to you, lad. Thank you very much. That means a lot. I do have some plans after I conclude Cassius. Of course, this summer, you're going to be getting Cassius Clone Wars Chronicles. and that will be an anthology collection set during the Clone Wars following different characters from Cassius. And then during the fall, you will get the Takai novel. So currently that's just slated to be one book, but we'll see how I feel when I'm writing it, and we'll see how you guys respond to it. And then a few other bits and pieces there of Cassius. The lore of Cassius will still be continuing after Jedi Redeemed. But yeah, you're going to get more content. And then I also have some very early ideas. I've been talking with Star Wars Elseworlds. We've been coming up with some ideas for stuff set in the Old Republic era. So you might see an ancestor of Cassius getting his own story down the line. So, hope I answered your question. From Milkman McGee. Have you had the chance to read any of the Star Wars novels set in the High Republic era? If so, what are your thoughts? I've not had the chance to sit down and read anything in full, but I have read excerpts. I've read bits and pieces. I know a little bit about the story of where the High Republic is tied into, and for the most part, it seems pretty good. Like I said, I can't make a full judgment because I haven't read most of it. I did, what was it, Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, I think it was the first novel that came out for the High Republic. I think that was it. I could be completely wrong, but I think I'm wrong on that. But the first High Republic novel that came out, I read a couple chapters of that, and I thought it was pretty good. The writing style was nice. I like the designs of the Jedi set during the High Republic. It's very regal, almost more fantasy than science fiction. So there are a lot of aspects I like about it. I just haven't had the chance to really dive into it. From Nolan UNO. Number 1, what would Cassius and Liara think of Joel and Ellie and vice versa if somehow Joel and Ellie were transported to the Star Wars universe? Did you on so let's answer that first. I think they'd probably get along decently well. I mean, Joel and Cassius are both survivors. Same with Ellie. And I think Ellie and Liara would probably get along well enough. I think Cassius and Joel would both probably be fairly distrustful of each other at first, but I think eventually they'd get along well enough. But maybe some of the things Joel has done would cause some tension with Cassius. He'd feel maybe Liara isn't safe around this guy. I think that's how it would go down. I have gotten comments before saying that Cassius and Liara basically is The Last of Us, but in space. And in some respects, I can see that. Though I feel that the relationship with Cassius and Liara is probably not quite as complex as it is with Joel and Ellie. I mean, Cassius and Liara, it's they have their moments of complexity where they're at odds with each other, but at the same time, they are a father-daughter dynamic. Whereas with Joel and Ellie, it's a father-daughter dynamic, and they obviously care for each other, but there's a lot of baggage there and so much stuff to unpack with what Joel did at the end of the first game, and it gets messed. So I appreciate that the comparison, but can't say it's an exact comparison. Number 2, did you on purpose make Master Takai look like a Lord of the Rings character? She really looks like one of me. I did not make her look like a Lord of the Rings character on purpose. I mainly came up with the design, and I thought, I like that. I think it fits well enough into Star Wars, and so I went with the design, and apparently some people think she looks like a character from Lord of the Rings, like an elf. I guess I can see it. Number 3, what actress would you want to play Master Takai? One for Padawan years and the other for Clone Wars years. I guess if we're doing like a young Takai, I would probably, I don't know, because there's a lot of very talented actresses out there who could play the role. I don't know too many off the top of my head right now. I'm not really caught up on the entertainment business. But for an older Takai, like set during the Cassius timeline, I think Gal Gadot would make a very good Master Takai. I think she'd do the job well. Thank you for your questions. From T-Dap. How do you come up with the plot, characters, etc. for Cassius? Do you have any advice for others trying this out? The way I do it is, once I have an idea, in this case, Cassius, the first thing I do is, think about what is his character like. I think about his personality, his traits, where he's from, what is his hair color, what is his eye color, just I try to detail the character as much as possible. Once I've got the character detailed, I think, all right, which era of Star Wars does his story begin in? What's going on at the time his story begins? What are things like in the galaxy? So start off by coming up with the character, trying to develop them as much as possible. After that, once you've got a solid character, place them into the era that your story is going to begin in. And then from there, what I did with Cassius, for example, I outlined all the major events in a single timeline. I have a diagram somewhere of a timeline of events, and I diagrammed and listed out each major event for each book. And after that, it was just a matter of tying things together, actually writing out the story. But once you've got an outline set, writing becomes a lot easier. So that's my biggest thing, outline. Outline the major things that are going to happen. And after that, like I said, writing becomes a lot easier. And then our next question is from Shinigami Groot. I hope I pronounced that right. Will you continue the Vader storyline with your original plot involving Exegol? I hope this is the case, as that was how I and others found the channel, and I need to see it conclude. I will conclude it at some point. Like I said, with the whole sequel thing, it's just become one of those things where I know if I include the Exegol subplot, it's just gonna get more vitriol in the comments. People asking, well, why did you have to go to Exegol? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And then another thing, I kind of burnt myself out doing the second part of or not just the second part, but just the story in general. I've kind of burnt myself out. I want to wait a little bit longer, just wait until I get that drive in me to say, I want to go back and conclude this. But I will conclude it. That is a promise. Unless I die, which I hope I don't. Our next question is from Aaron Preston, a good friend of mine. Hey man, I thought I would get in on the action. I know we talked about it, some, but I know from comments on videos this is a big question. The growing Cassius fan community is wondering now that you have announced there's now going to be a Cassius universe and more beyond the current series. What are your plans and hopes for the Cassius universe? Chat soon. May the force be may the force be with you. Thank you, Aaron. We'll talk soon. Like I said, we're going to be getting the Takai book in the fall, Cassius Clone Wars Chronicles in the summer, possibly a series of alternate universe Cassius stories or alternate scenarios where I take something that happened in Cassius and take it in another direction, kind of like a what if series, but for Cassius. And then again, possibly something involving the Old Republic later down the road. So that's the current roadmap. But things are always subject to change. I want everyone to remember that. I don't know what life has in store for me going forward, but we'll find out. Thank you for your question. From Ultra Shadow 95. Oh Lord. This one and the next one, we got a lot of questions incoming. Hey dude, got a couple questions for you today, so let's get to it. 1. Say Starkiller / Galen Merrick existed in the timeline of Cassius and was sent to kill him during The Force Unleashed. What do you think would have happened? Cassius would have died. Plain and simple. Starkiller was able to take on council members like Shaak Ti. He was able to solo Vader and Palpatine. Let's be honest, Cassius doesn't stand a chance against Starkiller. Yeah, Cassius would have died. Without significant help, Cassius would have died. Number 2. How do you think Cassius' life would have played out if he were raised as a Mandalorian warrior? If so, what color scheme would his armor be? I'm pretty sure you mentioned his parents were traveling merchants or something like that, so it seems plausible. The idea of a bounty hunting Cassius that unknowingly taps into the Force with a code of honor similar to Din Djarin just seems cool to me. If you were raised as a Mandalorian warrior, I believe his color scheme would be probably like a dark slate gray and maybe a deep forest green. That's what I think, at least. Number 3, if you were in the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender and could have control over one element, which would it be? I've always found this question interesting, as the answer can somewhat reflect a person's personality. So I'm curious as to what you would choose. I would definitely choose to be an earthbender. I think that's probably the most versatile of the elements outside of water. Because so many things around you are made out of earth or have elements of earth in it. You know, you could build houses, you could level whole areas of land for new development. There's so much you could do with earthbending, and so and I think honestly it's the one that lends itself the best to combative elements. So if you get into a situation where you need to fight, it's good to have earthbending on your side. And not to mention, if you bring in metal bending and lava bending, that's a whole nother ball game. There's so much you can do with earthbending, so I'd choose to be an earthbender. Thank you. Number 4, recently I've thought of a cool concept that I really wish would have happened in the Clone Wars. With the way the war was progressing and how law enforcement keeps treating the average citizens, the idea of a skilled Punisher / Red Hood style vigilante operating in the Coruscant underworld, taking the law into their own hands with the Jedi, investigating this vigilante and trying to determine his identity while exploring how the Order's own inaction led to such an outcome sounds badass. This brings me to my question. How do you think such an arc would go down, and what would be your thoughts on it? Well, it's an interesting idea. I think that with someone like Filoni behind it, yeah, it could have been something really cool. But I think if this person got too close to uncovering what Palpatine had planned, they would have died. So that's at least how I think it would have gone down. But I think it's a cool idea. Number 5. Lastly, if you were to have Cassius and Sarah from Nightfall fight it out, who do you think would win and why? It's kind of a toss-up because I always held that Sarah was more traditionally skilled at dueling than Cassius. But I think Cassius' determination and his will are major factors in how he's able to win many of the fights that he does. So it's kind of a toss-up. I think Cassius, Form 3 probably gives him a more defensive advantage. And at that point, it's up to Sarah to break his defenses or work around them. As for Cassius, it's just a matter of waiting for an opening. And if Sarah gets impatient enough, which is something that, is likely to happen with Sarah, he might just come out on top. So I think it's kind of a toss-up. I might give the slight edge to Sarah, but again, this is one of those that could go either way. Thank you for your questions. From Diamond360. 1. How do you find voice actors for your What If series? I've been looking for some, but struggling. So many of the voices in my series I do myself, but a lot of them are just contacts that I've made just throughout, doing YouTube. Or just doing other stuff. Like my actress for Leia and Ahsoka, I found her through a karaoke app that I used to use when I was bored. I think it was that Smule, I think it is, karaoke. And we enacted a scene from Star Wars together, and I thought she sounded really, really good. So I asked her if she wanted to be involved, and she said yes. And yeah, I still keep in contact with her. And again, it's just make contacts, find out what people's talents are, what they're good at. Never write them off, never abandon them. Just keep in contact with people. And, try to reach out to different people. Different people are skilled at different things. For me, I've built a large enough community that I have a reliable base of voice actors that I can bring on board if I can't do the voice myself. So that's my advice there. Number 2. What would your fan cast for the main Cassius characters be? I already did something on this, and I'll put it up on the screen just in case you didn't see it. But actors like Tanner Buchanan for Cassius, Michael Fassbender for Dravok, Tom Kenny for Pip, Gal Gadot for Master Takai. These are all my personal fan casts, but I'd like to know what other people think, like who they would cast. Number 3, in the hypothetical scenario where Cassius got the chance to enter the World Between Worlds and was given the chance to save only one person he ever lost, who would he save? So again, this goes to the whole World Between Worlds things and why I personally will not use it in Cassius. Mainly because it opens up too many cans of worms. We're still very unsure how exactly the World Between Worlds works, but we know one thing: the World Between Worlds is not time travel. Dave Filoni said that himself. You cannot just go back and just rescue anyone without consequence. I think if that were the case, Cassius would probably go back and save Sarah. Number 4, how are you doing? Has life been treating you well? Life has been treating me very well. Thank you very much. Now on to our last questions from Jordan Cox. And he says, hello, Concordia. I have 3 questions for you. Number 1, what is your opinion on The Mandalorian Season 3 so far? So far, I'm really enjoying it. I know a lot of people are having different opinions on it. Some people are thinking it's not moving fast enough, or it's going too slow. There's not much of a plot, but I'm always of the opinion you wait and see what happens. I'm reserving final judgment until the finale. So we'll see what happens so far, but I like the last episode. Number 2, in a battle between Cassius and Cal Kestis, who do you think would win? It's interesting you asked that. I actually put up a poll not too long ago asking that question. And yeah, it's at 50-50 exactly. 50% think Cassius would win, 50% think Cal Kestis would win. I cannot speak today. I think I'd probably give the edge to Cassius just because he has a bit more experience and for the most part held his own against Vader in the Inner Storm. He did have Dravok's help, so that was something, and Vader had only been in his suit for about a year and was still adjusting to it. But you can't write off Cal Kestis completely, especially if you've seen the new gameplay trailer. Some of the stuff Cal Kestis is doing is insane stuff. So I think it's one of those. It's very circumstantial. There in one day Cassius could win, another Cal Kestis could win. But I think the bigger question is, why are they fighting to begin with? Number 3. Which story are you most looking forward to writing in the Clone Wars Chronicles? Have a great week. I think the one I'm most looking forward to writing is probably Dravok's story. And you'll see why when we get to it, but I think you're really going to enjoy that. Have a great week. You too. And all of you have a great week as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another Q&A. We'll see you guys next time. May the Force be with you.